Tonight, while you're asleep, your brain will activate a cleaning system that flushes out toxic proteins linked to Alzheimer's disease. It will process your emotional memories, stripping away traumatic intensity. It will consolidate learning and solve problems your waking mind couldn't crack. But if you use sleeping pills or alcohol or have caffeine too late or check your phone whilst you're in bed, you'll sabotage these essential processes. You'll be unconscious, but your brain won't actually recover. Today, we're going to delve into some neuroscience. You'll have more understanding as to why the strategies from Part 2A work, what's happening in your brain during different sleep stages, and how modern life destroys sleep quality. You'll understand a bit more about sleep and your microbiome and some more modern medications. So let's start with what actually happens when you sleep. Your brain doesn't just switch off when you sleep. Throughout the night, you'll cycle through distinct stages of sleep, moving from NREM 1 to NREM 3, i.e. light sleep, into deep sleep. And then you'll move into REM sleep, this rapid eye movement sleep. And each complete cycle of this will take somewhere between, say, 70 and 120 minutes long. So about 90 minutes on average. And you'll go through about 4 to 6 cycles of this each night. Now, in between these complete cycles, you may wake up, usually for just a few seconds or even a minute or so, but most people won't remember this. And these awakenings are completely normal. So let me break down what happens in each cycle. You start in stage 1, and that's this very light sleep. That's that drifting sensation you get where you're very easy to wake up from. You'll then transition into stage 2 NREM sleep. And if we were to hook your brain up to a machine and have these a machine reading your brain waves, it will pick up distinct patterns called sleep spindles and K complexes. And this stage is where you'll spend the majority of your night. The next stage is stage 3 NREM sleep. And this is a deep, slow wave sleep. And it's the hardest stage to wake up from, where your brain will be producing these slow delta waves. And this is your physical restoration stage. Finally, you'll enter into REM sleep. This is rapid eye movement sleep, where vivid dreaming happens and your body becomes temporarily paralyzed to prevent you from acting out your dreams. And this pattern, how you progress through these stages over the course of a night, is called your sleep architecture. And each stage has a specific and crucial job. During NREM sleep, especially stage 3 slow wave sleep, something remarkable happens. Your brain activates what's called the glymphatic system, and you can think of that as your brain's dishwasher that only turns on at night. And during NREM, your brainstem will release waves of norepinephrine or noradrenaline, and these waves will cause your blood vessels to contract rhythmically, creating a pumping action that drives cerebrospinal fluid through your brain tissue. Now, this fluid will wash away metabolic waste products that have accumulated during the day, including proteins like beta amyloid, which is thought to be involved in Alzheimer's disease. One night of sleep deprivation causes a measurable buildup of various proteins in the brain. And of course, chronic poor sleep is prospectively linked to increased risks of things like dementia. Then comes REM sleep, or rapid eye movement sleep. This is where vivid dreaming happens, and it's absolutely critical for your psychological health. During REM sleep, your brain is doing 3 essential things, and the first is emotional memory processing with reduction of stress. Because during REM sleep, your locus ceruleus, which is a region in the brain that releases norepinephrine or noradrenaline, a kind of stress-related neurotransmitter, that area falls completely silent. And this means your brain can replay and process emotional memories for long-term storage, but without the norepinephrine signaling that originally encoded it as being stressful or emotionally intense. So you're literally separating the memory from its emotional intensity. And studies show that people deprived of REM sleep struggle with emotional regulation the next day. Their amygdala, which is an area of the brain involved with emotions, becomes hyperactive, overreacting to emotional stimuli, and this may be why you feel emotionally fragile after a bad night's sleep. The second thing that your brain does is memory consolidation and integration. So REM sleep is where your brain will integrate new information and existing knowledge. And if you ever notice how you suddenly understand something after you sleep on it, that's because REM sleep is reorganizing information and finding new connections. And the third is fear extinction and trauma processing. REM sleep is critical for processing and reducing fear responses. This is why REM sleep disruption is so prominent in PTSD, because they can't process traumatic memories without that stress-free memory replay. And here's something really critical to understand. REM sleep isn't evenly distributed throughout the night. In your first few sleep cycles, REM sleep periods are very short. They may be a few minutes, but as the night progresses, REM periods get longer and longer, and your final REM period may be the longest, could be lasting 40 minutes or even an hour. And this means if you sleep 8 hours, about 60 to 70% of your total REM sleep will happen in the second half of the night. So when you cut your sleep from 8 to say 6 hours, you think you might be losing only a quarter of your sleep, but you're actually losing most of your REM sleep. And remember, you're getting this glymphatic clearance from deep sleep in the first half of the night as well. But you're sacrificing that emotional processing and memory consolidation and fear extinction that happens predominantly in those long REM periods at the end. You need both types of sleep. NREM cleaning your brain of toxic waste and consolidates facts, and REM sleep processing emotions, free from stress chemicals and integrating everything into your existing knowledge. So when we disrupt this architecture, you might be unconscious for 8 hours, but your brain hasn't done its essential maintenance. And now that you have an understanding of sleep stages, let's talk about why power napping can work and why timing matters so much. So a proper power nap will take advantage of the lighter stages of sleep. For most well-rested people, approximately a 15 to 20 minute nap will allow you to progress through stage 1, that lovely drifting off feeling, into stage 2, where your brain activity slows and your muscles relax, and you get the restorative benefits without entering stage 3, that deep slow wave sleep. And some studies do show that a 20-minute nap improves alertness and reaction times and logical reasoning. And I think NASA did some research as well and found that something like a 25-minute or 26-minute nap improved pilots' performance by 30% and alertness by 50% or more. And the effects would peak after about 30 minutes after waking from that nap. There is obviously a danger zone, and it can get tricky because somewhere between 20 and 40 minutes into sleep, and the exact timing will vary between people, you begin to transition into stage 3 NREM sleep. And if you wake up from this stage, you'll experience sleep inertia. And sleep inertia is that heavy, groggy, disorientated feeling where your brain is essentially stuck between sleep and wake. Your cognitive function will be temporarily impaired, your reaction times will be slower, and you'll feel worse than before you actually napped. And this grogginess can last, say, half an hour or even several hours. The brain really doesn't like being woken from stage 3 sleep, because this is when you're in that slow delta wave sleep and you're clearing metabolic waste through the glymphatic system, and the brain is in deep maintenance mode and doesn't want to be interrupted. So if you obviously have 90 minutes available, or perhaps longer, you can try to sleep through a full sleep cycle, going through all the NREM stages and into REM sleep. And this will, of course, enhance memory, creativity, and mood without giving you that sleep inertia, because you'll wake up naturally from a lighter sleep. But most people don't have 90 minutes, which is why the 20-minute power nap became used. But you have to remember what I said. Everyone's sleep cycle is slightly different lengths. So the 20-minute guideline works perhaps as a starting point, but you'll need to experiment. If you wake groggy from a 20-minute nap, you might need to try 15 minutes instead. And remember, if you're severely sleep deprived, your brain may drop into stage 3 sleep much quicker, even say 10 to 15 minutes, which is why chronic sleep deprivation is difficult or can't really be fixed with naps. You need full, proper night's sleep to go through that full sleep architecture. Now that you understand sleep architecture, let me show you why the most common solutions in terms of medications that people reach for actually makes things worse. So common sleeping pills work by enhancing GABA, gamma-aminobutyric acid, which is your brain's main inhibitory neurotransmitter that slows neural activity. And traditional benzodiazepines like diazepam force sedation. They make you unconscious, but there's a devastating trade-off. They disrupt your sleep architecture that we just talked about. Benzodiazepines suppress the deepest stages of slow wave sleep, the stage that clears metabolic waste from your brain. They also heavily suppress REM sleep, your psychological repair shop, where emotional regulation and memory consolidation will happen. So you might be unconscious for 8 hours, but your brain hasn't processed emotions, cemented memories, or achieved the deep physical repair it needs. So you're getting quantity without actually any quality. And then there was these newer Z drugs like zolpidem and zopiclone, and they were supposed to be developed as a more selective alternative to benzodiazepines, but research revealed a concerning issue with them. So if you remember that norepinephrine or noradrenaline oscillations we discussed earlier, those waves that occur, say, every 50 seconds or so during sleep, driving that glymphatic clearing system. Well, some research recently showed, certainly in mice, that zolpidem, or these Z drugs, they suppress these norepinephrine oscillations, potentially reducing the brain's waste removal during sleep. So you're trading short-term unconsciousness for potentially compromised long-term brain health. And beyond architecture disruption, there's the addiction risk. With continuous use, physical tolerance develops, and you may need higher and higher doses to get the same effect. And there's also psychological dependence. You become convinced that you can't sleep without the pill. And there can be, withdrawal effects. Stopping causes rebound insomnia. And if you get this combination of physical and psychological dependence, you end up in this horrible situation where you can't really sleep with the pill and you can't sleep without it, which is a terrible situation to be in. And now let's talk a bit about alcohol. And I call alcohol the biphasic saboteur of sleep because alcohol does essentially the same thing to your sleep architecture, but it's a little bit more complicated because it has a biphasic or 2 distinct phases of action. And the first phase is this kind of stimulant effect where you first start drinking alcohol. It doesn't immediately sedate you, but at low doses, as your alcohol content rises, you may feel more alert, more energized, and euphoric in a way. And this initial effect from alcohol comes from it triggering dopamine release in your brain's reward center. And at low blood alcohol concentrations, this dopamine-driven stimulation can make you feel more energized and more sociable. And then comes phase 2, the depressant effect, because alcohol also enhances GABA activity throughout your brain. And as your blood alcohol rises further, widespread GABA activation causes central nervous system depression, which then leads on to things like slurred speech, poor coordination, and sedation. And another neurotransmitter in your brain called glutamate, which is an excitatory neurotransmitter, is inhibited, which further slows brain activity. And this dopamine-driven stimulation, which occurred initially, is eventually overridden by the GABA sedation effect. So if you're using alcohol as a sleep aid tool, it could be causing problems because it first might be energizing you, but if you're using more, You might fall asleep faster due to the sedation, but REM sleep is heavily suppressed in the first half of the night, and as alcohol metabolizes usually around 3 to 4 hours later, you experience rebound wakefulness, and sleep becomes more fragmented and restless in the second half of the night. And you're also dehydrated, and your temperature regulation might become disrupted. So you might pass out for 8 hours, but you wake up feeling absolutely awful because your brain never achieved proper REM sleep or deep NREM sleep. And this is why neither pills nor alcohol are solutions to a sleep problem. They're creating a different problem while masking the original one. Your sleep architecture is beautiful. It's an essential rhythm of NREM and REM cycles, and this is what actually restores you, and anything that disrupts that is working against that beautiful biology. So if pills and alcohol don't work, what does? So let's understand the neuroscience part, starting with your most powerful tool, light. And I mentioned this in other videos, how important light is. So your eyes contain specialized photoreceptor cells called intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells, or IPRGCs. These aren't the rods and cones you use for vision. They contain a photopigment called melanopsin, and that's specifically tuned to detect blue wavelengths of light at around 480 nanometers. And when melanopsin detects that blue light, especially morning sunlight, these cells send signals directly to your suprachiasmatic nucleus via the retinohypothalamic tract. Crikey, that's a big word. The SCN, or the suprachiasmatic nucleus, then sends inhibitory signals to your pineal gland, immediately shutting down melatonin production. But it does more than that. This light exposure triggers a molecular cascade in your SCN that resets your clock genes, literally changing gene expression patterns in your master pacemaker. Proteins called clock genes and BMAL1, they start a new kind of transcription cycle, synchronizing all of your peripheral clocks. And the timing matters because of your phase response curve. Morning light shifts your rhythm earlier, advancing your clock. Evening light will delay it. This isn't psychology, it's photochemistry directly altering gene expression in your brain's timekeeper. At night, even modest light exposure, perhaps even as low as something like 50 lux or even 30 lux, can suppress melatonin production by a significant amount. So you could go around with a lux meter at night if you like to check your lights are below 30 lux. And this, again, is due to those melanopsin cells remaining sensitive in darkness, and any blue wavelengths of light will tell your SCN that it's daytime. Don't start that sleep sequence that we'd mentioned. Yes, your phone's blue light will suppress melatonin through the melanopsin pathway we just discussed. But the greater threat is what really is happening in your brain's reward centers and emotion centers when you use your phone. When you encounter novel information, a new message or notification or a post, your brain's ventral tegmental area will release dopamine into this reward center, your nucleus accumbens. And this dopamine surge creates a sense of anticipation and motivation, keeping you engaged. Simultaneously, if that information is stressful, a work email, bad news, some kind of social comparison, your brain will activate the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, which connects your brain to your adrenal glands. And within minutes, your adrenal glands start releasing stress hormones like cortisol, and your sympathetic nervous system, which is involved in fight or flight, will start releasing norepinephrine. These kind of stress hormones keep you in a state of heightened alertness. Cortisol increases glucose availability for energy. It raises your core body temperature. And as we know, you need your core temperature to drop to fall asleep. And it keeps your prefrontal cortex active in problem-solving mode. So you've biochemically transformed your bedroom into a high alert environment. And what about caffeine? Well, caffeine is a molecular mimic. Its structure is similar enough to adenosine that it binds to your adenosine receptors, specifically the A1 and A2A subtypes, but different enough that it doesn't actually activate them. And this is known as competitive antagonism. Caffeine occupies the receptor sites, preventing adenosine from binding and sending it slow down, it's time to rest kind of signal. So your brain can't really read its own tiredness. And in addition, it's your liver that metabolizes caffeine using an enzyme called CYP1A2. But this, of course, takes time and it follows something called first-order kinetics, leaving a half-life of approximately 6 hours in most people. And half-life just means that it's the time it takes for your body to eliminate half of a substance. So 200 milligrams of caffeine at 2 p.m. becomes 100 milligrams at 8 p.m., 6 hours later, and 50 milligrams at 2 a.m. And even at these low concentrations, they might still occupy enough adenosine receptors to fragment your sleep architecture. And worse, chronic caffeine use causes receptor upregulation. Your brain literally grows more adenosine receptors to compensate for it being blocked. And this is why tolerance develops and why caffeine withdrawal causes crushing fatigue, because suddenly you have excess receptors and they're all detecting adenosine and nothing is blocking them. So in general, it's a good idea to wait 90 minutes after waking before your first caffeine to allow your adenosine to naturally clear. And it's also a good idea to leave your last caffeinated drink at least 6 hours before your intended bedtime, and preferably even longer. And if you must have afternoon caffeine, make sure it's tiny amounts and only in the early afternoon and definitely not later in the afternoon. So let's talk a little bit about temperature. Your sleep initiation is tightly coupled to thermoregulation. For your brain to transition into NREM sleep, your core body temperature needs to drop by about 1 to 2 degrees Celsius. And this happens through peripheral vasodilation. Your blood vessels in your hand, your feet, face, they all dilate to radiate heat away from your core. And it's your preoptic area of the hypothalamus that orchestrates this, responding to both circadian signals from the SCN and local temperature sensors. And here's something really counterintuitive. Taking a warm bath 60 to 90 minutes before bed actually helps to cool you down faster, because when you immerse yourself in warm water, your body responds by dilating blood vessels throughout your periphery, so in your hands, your feet, your face, and that's to help release that heat that you've gained through that warm water. So this means when you get out of the bath, this enhanced vasodilation persists, and your core temperature drops more rapidly than it would naturally because of all these dilated blood vessels now radiating heat away efficiently. So this accelerated cooling triggers your sleep mechanisms more effectively when you get into bed. So it's really important to keep your environment, so your room environment, at a lower temperature. And we'd say around about 18 degrees to 20 degrees Celsius, because this will help facilitate this heat dissipation. Warmer temperatures prevent the necessary core cooling, delaying sleep onset and reducing slow wave sleep duration. This isn't really about comfort per se, it's your natural thermophysiology. And a word on consistency. Remember, you have trillions of cellular clocks throughout your body. They crave consistency. So even if your ideal bedtime is, say, midnight, going to bed at midnight every night, including weekends, is going to be better than varying by 2 to 3 hours. Before we look at some modern medications of sleep medicine, here's something that's reshaping how we understand all of this, and that's your gut microbiome. There are trillions of organisms living in your intestines, from bacteria to viruses, and it turns out that they have their own circadian rhythm. These populations will literally rise and fall throughout the day based on what you eat and, say, when you sleep as well. And the relationship works both ways. Your sleep pattern shapes which organisms will thrive in your gut, whilst those organisms are sending chemical signals back to your brain. For instance, some bacteria can produce GABA, that same calming neurotransmitter your brain uses for sleep. Others create compounds called short-chain fatty acids that can influence how your circadian clock genes express themselves throughout your body. So when people chronically disrupt their sleep, their gut microbiome changes. Less diversity, there might be different bacterial species, which then makes sleep potentially harder. It's another feedback loop. But herein lies an optimization opportunity. Consistent meal timings and really good quality food helps maintain your microbiome and its natural rhythm. It's the same principle we've seen everywhere: light, temperature, food timing, sleep architecture, and now even your gut bacteria. They're all evolved expecting predictable daily patterns. Everything is talking to everything else in your body. So let's now talk about something that changed how we understand wakefulness. In the 90s, researchers discovered a neuropeptide called orexin, also known as hypocretin. So orexin neurons in your hypothalamus act like your brain's master stay awake switch. When these neurons fire, they simultaneously activate multiple alert systems: dopamine for motivation, norepinephrine for focus, and even histamine in there for elements of wakefulness. So we know how critical this system is because of people that suffer with narcolepsy. People with this disorder might have lost 85 to 95% of their orexin-producing neurons. And without orexin coordinating their wakefulness, they can't maintain stable wakefulness. They fall asleep, really, without warning. They suddenly just drop off. And understanding this system led to a different class of sleep medications called DORAs, or dual orexin receptor antagonists. So unlike benzodiazepines or Z drugs that force sedation and disrupt your sleep architecture, DORAs simply block that stay awake signal, allowing your natural sleep pressure to take over. So this preserves your natural sleep architecture, and both deep NREM and REM remain intact. So it's working more with your biology rather than against it. And that, I think, is pretty exciting. But the most exciting changes aren't just in medications. They're in how we're redesigning society around circadian biology. Seattle delayed school start times, allowing students to get, say, an extra 30 minutes of sleep, and their grades improved by, I think it was around 5%. There are various companies now, large companies, that recognize the differing chronotypes, allowing people more flexible work hours and increasing productivity. So just imagine workplaces designed around circadian biology, cities with lighting that supports natural rhythms, schools that start when teenage brains are ready to learn. And this isn't really science fiction, it is actually happening now, one chronotype conscious decision at a time. This is what I want you to take away. Everything we've discussed, your master clock, your peripheral organs, your gut bacteria, your orexin system, your sleep architecture, all of it is interconnected. Your sleep isn't controlled by a single switch. It's this beautiful, complex symphony, and that symphony has been playing for a very, very long time. Now you have a more complete picture. You know your chronotype from part 1 and 2A. You understand the trillions of cellular clocks, your SCN master conductor, process C and process S working together. You know that NREM sleep cleans toxic proteins from your brain through the glymphatic system, while REM processes emotions, free from stress chemicals, and integrates memories. You understand why sleeping pills and alcohol sabotage this essential sleep architecture. You know caffeine's 6-hour half-life, why your phone's mental stimulation destroys sleep, and how light is your most powerful optimization tool. Most importantly, you understand that your sleep isn't a moral failing. It's a magnificent, complex dance between your DNA, the sun, and the social structures you live within. If you haven't watched part 1 and or part 2A, please go and watch it now to get your personalized chronotype and strategies. I'll leave the link in the description. But do start with a change. Get morning sunlight. Try and remove your phone from your bedroom. Set your bedroom temperature to 18 or 20 degrees Celsius and move your last coffee 2 hours earlier if possible. And also remove visible clocks from your bedroom if you're a dolphin. And as always, I'll leave you with this thought. Those trillions of cellular clocks ticking away inside you, they're not just biological machinery. They're your connection to something far more ancient and vast. For billions of years, as Earth spun on its axis, day after day, night after night, life evolved in rhythm with that rotation. Every sunrise selected for organisms that could anticipate the light. Every sunset favoured those that could prepare for darkness. Your clock genes, your melanopsin cells, your SCN, these aren't accidents. They're the results of billions of sunrises shaping life itself. You are quite literally a child of Earth's rotation around our sun. Every element in your body, heavier than hydrogen, was born in a stellar furnace, forged in the nuclear fires of ancient stars, and gifted to us in their spectacular supernova deaths. How fitting, then, that your biological rhythms are governed by the light of a star. We are stellar matter, dancing to stellar light. And when you honour your sleep, when you align your circadian rhythms, you're not just optimizing your health, you're participating in the same cosmic dance that has governed life since the very beginning. So, keep that wonder and keep wondering about life.